All right. So let's talk about cognitive bias and how it's messing up your dating perception. The easiest way for me to explain cognitive bias is as an African-American here in the United States. There have been, historically a lot of tragedies, and historically have been a lot of, things that we've had to fight hard and strong for. And so as a result of that, in the Black community, there are definitely a lot of hangups that we have to where when something outside the media happens, for example, our first thoughts is to automatically look at it from a racial lens and make an assumption about what was going on. Perfect example, obviously, is like for those of you that weren't around the 90s when the O.J. Simpson trial was happening, that was a pretty big deal because there was a wide perception that O.J. must be innocent because these cops, they didn't really handle the evidence the right way. And so we already know as Black people how those white cops can be against Black people. And so therefore he must be innocent. And most Black people at large thought he was innocent. And then when they voted that he was not guilty, Black America was like, oh my gosh, this is great. He's got justice. Now, today's perception of OJ for amongst Black people is that he probably did that. He probably actually unalived his ex-wife, and it was a tragedy. But why did we have such a strong perception at the time about he must not be guilty and the cops must be after him? It's because based on our own bias of seeing the cops do things and maybe our own experiences, we just automatically assumed that if the white people were going after OJ must have not done it because historically they have framed us and yada, yada, yada. And most of us today believe that is not the case. But that's an example of how, because we had our own biases against the police force, against law, against judges and stuff like that, how the angle that we were going to come at was going to have that racial lens on it because Black America at large looks at stuff from a very racial lens, all right? And so this is also true for a lot of different things, but as it pertains to your dating life, for example, if you're an introvert watching this, like I am, you could have the thought that women across the board just don't like introverts because they find us too silent, then we're not all that exciting, and so therefore women aren't going to want us. So as a result of that, what can happen? Well, you as an introvert could be out there in the world and you're seeing women left and right and thinking to yourself, nah, she wouldn't want me because women don't go after guys like me. Nah, she's not going to want a guy that's quiet and wants time to himself. Oh, she'll never be able to accept a guy that wants his alone time at home because she's going to get mad and upset. So what happens is now as an introvert, you're taking what you perceive as perceived flaws and saying, based on these perceived flaws of introverts, the world is going to now respond to me in a certain way. But what happens is you now end up looking for that specific way for people to get rid of you. And even at times when it's not happening, your brain is going to be unable to actually process that it's not happening because it always happens. As an introvert, you are going to get rejected. And I know when I was, back in my high school days, a lot of people called me weird and strange or whatever. And so I took that mantle on as, because I'm weird and strange, people won't date me. And then I got into college and I was, quote, still doing those weird and strange things. But women around me, even if it was weird and strange, they didn't find it unappealing. But in my head, I already had it as though, based on the way I act and the way that I am, women aren't going to want me. And therefore, I should not be getting women. This is a subconscious thought now, right? So I'd be out there on the one hand being upset that women don't want to date me, but I'm like, if I'm really being honest with myself, as I'm looking around, what kind of perceived biases was I bringing in? And so it was interesting that the person I was watching last night came across this article, which actually perfectly describes what it is that's going on. And so I'm going to share my screen here. How do I do that? Here we go. This one right here? Yes. I want to make it bigger. So let's go here. Here we go. So this right here is an example of, this is the famous test of cognitive bias, and it's called the SCAR test. And this is a test that was done I think back in the late 80s or early 90s. But basically, here's how the cognitive bias test goes, right? So it's called the SCAR test. Researchers at a university in the United States conducted an interesting psychological experiment, the SCAR experiment. This is basically a summary of that experiment. They declared to the volunteers who participated in the experiment that the purpose of this experiment was to observe people's reactions to strangers with physical defects, especially those with facial scars. Volunteers were arranged in a small room without mirrors, and a professional makeup artist made a bloody and shocking scar on the left side of their face. volunteers were allowed to use a small mirror to take a look at the makeup effect after makeup, and then the mirror was taken away. So person put the scar on their face, they looked at it, okay, oh, that's a hideous scar, awesome. So now they think they're going to go out there into the world and they're going to see how people react to the scar on their face, right? But before that happens, it says next, the makeup artist said that he needed to apply another layer of powder on the surface of the scar to prevent the scar from being accidentally wiped off. In fact, the makeup artist secretly erased the traces of makeup with the tissue, and the volunteers had no knowledge of this. So what they do, they went in, said, oh, we got to fix something. And then they just wiped the scar off. And then because the people didn't have a mirror, they weren't able to tell that the scar was taken off. So they still think now that they have a big old scar on their face, right? And they have no idea because they don't have the small mirror. They don't have any mirrors to look at. Okay. So after that happened, volunteers were sent to waiting rooms of different hospitals to observe people's reactions to their facial scars. So now they're sitting there and they're looking people walk by, and the people are staring back at them, and they're thinking these people walking by are going to be able to see this hideous scar that's actually no longer on their face, but they don't know that, right? So after the experiment, they reflected the same feelings that people were more rude and unfriendly to them than before, and they always stared at their faces. So they're basically saying, yeah, all these people came by and they like looked at me rude or acted kind of weird around me. And obviously it's because of the scar, right? Because they're still thinking they have the scar on their face. But as it says here, in fact, their faces are the same as usual. The reason for this feeling is that their wrong self-cognition affects their judgment. Their scars are on their hearts, not their faces. They preconceived and very stubbornly believe that if they have wounds on their face, others will hate them. Others will hate themselves and be rude to them. So others are really rude to them. As the saying goes, however a person sees himself in his heart, he can feel what kind of vision in the outside world. So what is this whole experiment saying? This experiment is saying that because these people have a huge scar on their face, they already are of the thought that in the real world, when people have scars on their faces, other people react to them negatively. So what happened in this experiment, every single time somebody walked by them and gave them a weird look or an odd stare or a cold shoulder, they assumed, yep, just as I thought, I got a really big old scar on my face, and that's why they're reacting the way they are, and that's how I expect that to happen. But they didn't have a scar the whole time. So what was actually happening? Well, they already assumed they're going to get some kind of negative reaction because of the scar on their face. So now we don't know, were these people without the scars on their face, but they thought they had one, when they're looking at these other people, how are they looking at them? Are they staring at them weird? Like, I'm waiting for you to like say something mean or look at me odd. Or are they staring at them and the people walking by are like, why is this person staring at me? Like, this is really awkward. Like, we don't know. But all we know is that because they had an inherent bias that a scar on their face would cause strangers to treat them rudely and offensively, that in their head, that's the reaction that they were getting, even though in reality wise, that probably wasn't it at all. People probably just walked by, looked at them, said, I don't know you, and then just kept walking. But their thing is like, oh, they didn't want to talk to me because I have a scar. So how does this correlate now? Let me take the screen now. How does this correlate to your dating life? Well, because, I get messages and letters from guys, and I have people write me and say things like, well, for example, I'm 5'6", and so therefore no girls will date me. Like all the girls in the world, they're looking at me and saying I'm a small guy, and none of them are saying yes. It must be because of my height. Or it'll be a guy like, I'm a little overweight and pudgy, and so no girls are going to date me because I'm overweight, I'm not fit, I'm not like chiseled with abs and whatever. And so therefore, all these girls, when I walk in the street, they're staring at me weird, they're looking at me, and I know they're all thinking that I'm just a loser reject guy because that's how big people get treated, that's how small guys get treated, and therefore that's the view of the world. And I thought the same way at one point. Obviously, I know, like for example, with dating apps, black men are the lower on the totem pole. So I could very easily go on dating apps and say, I'm not getting into dates because I'm black and that's what it is, and women just don't want to date black dudes and blah, 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 blah. But in all three of these examples, there are so many examples to the contrary of that. So for example, short dudes, that's a bias they have against themselves. They're like, oh, because I'm short, women aren't going to like me. I see short dudes with tall women and women that are their size or shorter, like quite often. I have a couple of friends from college actually that are like 5'5" that have gotten married or are in long-term relationships with women that are like 5'6" or higher. You know, they didn't allow their short stature to be the thing that was going to make their brains trick them into thinking I now can't get somebody because I'm freaking 5'5". You know, I know dudes that are bigger dudes that still manage to get like, strange enough, fitter women. So because you got to look at in these situations, these guys weren't saying because I have this so-called alleged defect or because I'm different in this way that, you know, because the world at large typically, you know, shuns these people or makes fun of them or laughs, that therefore that's going to happen to me. They just figured this is my situation. It is what it is. I'm just to go out there and try to treat women the best that I possibly can. And I hope that in doing that I'll be able to connect with one that gels well with me, but I'm not going to let that stop me because realistically, I'm a dude, I want a family, I want to hook up. And so I can't let the bias that I have in my head about these things like trip me up. So you got to ask yourself, what biases do you have right now that could potentially be stopping you from having the dating life that you want? What quote unquote scars do you have on you, or in what ways do you go about in the world that you think this is too weird or awkward for a woman to like? And then when you go out there, what biases can you now recognize are causing you to see things that aren't actually there? You know, for the longest time, like I was a virgin until I was 23. For the longest time, I just assumed that because I was a virgin, women wouldn't want to date me. And so my whole first year of college, like there were women that had crushes on me, but because I was thinking, well, they know I'm a virgin, so they're not going to want to date me, I didn't even try to pursue them. Because I had my own bias in my head that me being a virgin equals women aren't going to want to date me, and therefore I shouldn't even try. And then when I got to my sophomore year, my junior year, that all started to come crumbling down because I was telling everybody on campus I was a virgin. I don't know why. I don't know why I was very proud at the time of that, okay? But the point is that most of the women knew, and they were still crushing on me, still wanted to, you know, have a good time with me, even if it didn't mean hooking up, doing other things. And I just so in hindsight, so stuck on this idea that me being a virgin means women wouldn't want to date me, that I ended up self-sabotaging potential things that could have actually worked out great because of my own ideas about my perceived flaw that should turn women away. Like I'm the one that's turning them away. They're ones coming to me and I'm saying, no, they're not going to want me. No, you got to push them. And so you got to look at like, what things have you experienced in your past? What baggage do you have? How were you talked about as a kid that you're still carrying on your head? You know, are you a guy that's like, oh, well, I'm really into video games. And so women don't like guys that play video games. So I guess I just can't find anybody. Oh my God. Like that could be holding you back. You thinking you have like weird hobbies that other people won't get into. And therefore you can't try to date a girl. She's not going to like that. I like Lord of the Rings, or I like building boats on the weekend. Like you could be having all these things that's a running narrative in your head. And then what you're doing is you're going out in the world, and because of your cognitive bias, you're trying to find proof of you being right, because that's what our brain wants to do. Our brain is going to be our cheerleader for good or for bad. So if we have a negative perception of ourselves and we're saying, based on these things about me, women aren't going to want me, or because I don't have a lot of money and all girls want guys with a lot of cash, that they're not going to date me, you're going to go out into the world, you're going to go on YouTube, and you're going to either look up things or find examples of ways that prove your bias. Oh, see that girl walk by me because she sees my car is like a 90s car. Yeah, this is proof she just wants me for money. See, I knew it. Versus being able to stop and think, wait a minute. And again, this is how I got past all this, right? The way that I got past the whole cognitive bias thing is I started looking in the world and realizing that there were plenty of examples of people that were my race, that were my height, that were my age, that were my build, that were in my money situation, that also had women. So the narrative that I was trying to put out there, when I'm looking at these other people, I couldn't do it anymore because I was like, but that's not true. Because, you know, oh, women on dating apps don't choose black dudes. But like I had friends that were black that met women on dating apps and hooked up with them and got married. Oh, I can't do X, Y, and Z. Like we really are at sometimes our worst enemy because we want to be so right even in our wrongness. And that speaks to our ego. Our egos are very much like, if this is what you think, fine. We're on board with that. We're going to help you continue to think that. We're going to help you look for examples of the things that you're saying that you don't want, even though we could help you find examples of things that you do want, but you don't seem to want that. You want to seem to be the victim and seem to be able to say, hey, I just want to like, you know, I really want to stick to the fact that girls don't like me or whatever. And then you're going out there and looking for proof. And do you want to waste your time doing that? Like, is it worth your time to continue to be stuck in your cognitive bias so you can prove yourself right about how women are trash and about how women don't want you, but now you get to stay home and not get a hookup and not connect with somebody and not have the dating life you want? Like you got to really get past this idea that the way in which you are and the things that you think about and how you view the world is the only way to view the world. Because while you're stuck in this mode of, you know, based on your bias, these are the way women are, and this is X, Y, and Z, you're in the process of that missing out on all the other women that are out there that legitimately could bring you a good dating life. Now, with that said, you might have some things about you that you need to work on, whether it's your speech patterns, whether it's how you're talking to women in general, whether it's being able to connect with another person, whether it's not being so needy or desperate. And those are things that can be worked on with coaching, which you can get if you go to introvertdatingsuccess.com and click on the coaching tab. But more to the point, even if you don't go for coaching, really start observing your thoughts and start looking at, I'm thinking this way, or I'm a certain way, and I'm thinking based on this certain way of how I am, that women aren't going to date me. But is that actually true? Are there other examples of that out there that prove that I'm wrong? And then why do I think that way in the first place? Why am I trying to self-sabotage myself before I actually put myself out there and get into a relationship? You start doing that kind of work and you start really listening to your thoughts, you'll start to realize that we have a lot of negative thoughts we carry around. And it's as simple as being able to recognize when a negative thought's coming into your head, stopping it, and then trying to come up with an alternative thought. So for example, you're out and about in the world, you're walking around, you see a hot girl walking by. You think to yourself, she's not going to want me because I play video games and, women don't like guys that play video games. You can say, wait a minute, that's a negative thought. And is that actually true? Because there are women out there that go to video game tournaments and watch video games on YouTube and follow streamers and Twitch and stuff like that. Like, they actually are out there. Could it just be that maybe you haven't been as observant of that, or that the women you've been around to this point haven't done that? And if so, could you just move yourself to a circle of women that do like that? For every guy that's like, oh, I'm a nerd, I'm a comic book nerd and women don't like me, there are plenty of women that show up at Comic-Con every year. So you got to really look at, again, are the biases that you have about what you think women are going to like based on how you are they actually true? Or is it your current perception based on years of, whether it's been, past traumas that you've had with that, or just not really looking beyond just your blinders to see the whole world that's actually out there. If that's the case, then really consider how you can get rid of those cognitive biases. Because I'm telling you, what you do, it opens you up to a world of women that you may not have ever even thought would actually have dated you in the first place. So hopefully, guys, this helps you out. Just wanted to jump on here and do a really quick, short little video for you guys today. But hopefully that helps you start thinking about some of the biases you may have and start working past them. Again, if you need help with that, go to introvertdatingsuccess.com, click on the coaching tab. I'd love to help you with a one-on-one coaching consultation, all right? Also go there for eBooks, audiobooks, programs, and albums, all designed to help you date as your introverted self while still getting your precious alone time. Thank you so much for watching this live. I am HarryWilmington, and you know what? I will catch you guys on the next one. I'm out. Peace.
Call this beat Will Smith, cause it slaps hard. Hear it knock when I pull up on your boulevard. Ain't got no rims spinning, ain't got no chain blinging, but I got money, you can tell by all the hungry women. Leveled up like I'm world 8.